We'll get a number.
Gavelin, this Budget and Finance Committee meeting of the whole, it's March 21st, just after noon. And we have assembly members coming in. Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
John Littleton.
I was going to start at that end, but Ms. Quinn.
Austin Quinn Davidson.
So there, he's going to do everybody. Mr. Rivera. Eric Croft. So we lack a quorum, but we'll proceed to hear reports as assembly and announce assembly members that come in. Mr. Peterson and Mr. Dyson were here and I think stepped out. First on our agenda, impacts from the proposed Alaska budget. Are there going to be any?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think what I can share with you right now is as we're building our 2019 1Q budget, we do expect some impacts from the budget. The two big things that could influence our decisions is revenue sharing and then Medicaid. The administration is of the belief right now that we do think that we'll get some or all of the revenue sharing, despite that it's not in the governor's budget. So we may be leaning that way. As it relates to Medicaid, we do think that the Medicaid reimbursements, particularly as it relates to ambulances, will not be part of our budget. So we'll be taking that revenue stream out. That's about $3.5 million. As it relates to the impacts, there are a variety of other things. I think, as the Chief of Staff mentioned, there's some lost grant revenue to the health department that could affect some nursing. So there will be some impacts to our budget, and we're working diligently with that piece of information and a variety of others that I'll talk about here. So yes, there will be some impacts.
Pause for a second. Mr. Dyson, Peterson, and Dunbar are here physically, and then Ms. LaFrance here on the phone.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
So I think, Mr. Chairman, that's the highlights. When we, and I can talk a little bit more about it when we get to 3D, but the impacts of the state budget that are illustrated in our first quarter revisions, I'll be highlighting those in our work session.
So we had a discussion regarding the school board budget about how affected entities like the municipality or the Anchorage School District reflect the budget, the governor's proposal. One way is to say it hasn't been enacted yet and we're not going to consider it until it's enacted. It's just a proposal. All the way, I guess, to implementing it as though the legislature were going to do what the governor proposed. It sounds like you're doing something in between and trying to predict which of the proposed cuts are more likely.
So that is mostly true. The three things that we are, at least right now, the administration is saying we are not going to change the amount that we have in our budget for the PFD. The reason that number is important is that we have those that don't pay fines and fees in the municipality, we get some recovery. We have it budgeted at $2,500 in our budget. We're not changing that in our proposal, at least at this point. The Medicaid, we were anticipating that we would receive some reimbursements for $3.5. We're going to take that out. The revenue sharing at this point, we're going to keep in at the full $6.1 million. Those are the three big things that, or at least the big things that are related to the state's budget that we are currently assuming in our 1Q. And between now and April 9th, when we submit it, the administration may give us a different direction. But that's where we are right now.
Are you assuming that we will have the ability to contribute less to the school district because of school district cuts?
Honestly, Mr. Chairman, I do not know. It's difficult to predict.
And are you budgeting, it's sort of a pass-through, that the bond debt reimbursement will increase the cap, if you will, by 40-ish million, so that those will be paid back. My understanding was they were part of the bond. We haven't needed it, but now it kind of flows above the cap, right?
So right now the school district has bond debt reimbursement in their budget. It's about $36 million. That was part of the original plan. The 41 million would be in addition to that, which would bond debt reimbursement that the state, their portion was supposed to recover. The school district's budget approved by the Assembly Tuesday night did not include that, so we will not be adjusting the cap in May for that $41 million for that bond debt reimbursement. I think should the legislature take different action, I think Dr. Bishop mentioned to the Assembly, should the legislature take action that some or all or none of that bond debt reimbursement would then be back to the Anchorage, the residents of Anchorage, our taxpayers, we would then adjust our cap in 2020. The other thing to recognize is that the bond debt reimbursement for the school district, the recovery of that is on 2 different years because they're on a different calendar year. So we may be able to, recover. If it is 41 million, we may only have to recover half of that in 2020. But again, it's really too early to tell.
Mr. Weddleton.
Well, now I have a bunch of questions. I have one. A couple.
Yeah.
So you said you're going to assume you don't get that Medicaid for $3 million, but revenue sharing $9 million.
6.1 is what we have in our budget, and I'm sorry, Mr. Weddleton. We assumed 6.1 because that's the amount that we received last year.
But they're pretty much saying that's not good. Is that unrestricted revenue sharing or all revenues? Because some we get lots of flow through stuff.
I think this is the formula-based revenue sharing.
You're going to assume that'll come.
Yes.
Okay. And then the $41 million for ASP, we could, during our budget discussion, say we didn't do it Tuesday,
right,
and it's a school district thing, but we could do it in a couple of weeks when we do our first.
I believe that you could. It would require an amendment of the school district budget following.
Oh, I see. But it could be done.
I believe that it could. I mean, I could check with legal, but I believe so.
And I think, my thoughts, and we'd emailed a little about this is, if we don't do it, okay, then we take it out of fund balance, whatever, maybe it's a 20 million or 40, whatever, big number, and pay it. And then we have to reimburse it next year. Well, then the next year we'd have that plus probably another 41 million because if we don't do it this year. So then all of a sudden we hit the taxpayers with 60 million, which is going to be what, $600 something per average house. And that's massive. People really cool. My gut feeling is I'd rather do more now, and then if we do get it, be prepared to refund it. We talked about that with $15 million thing 3 years ago.
I know it's a work session, but speak up a little bit.
Okay. I don't know. That's just some thoughts I had. I'm sharing them because we can't tell.
And I think when we get into the first quarter budget revisions, I'll talk to Alex and I'll talk to our attorneys in the school district about how that might play out on the schedule and in which it would do, and whether or not the Assembly, if they elected to incorporate that bond debt, how much would they incorporate? So we'll talk about we'll work on it.
I guess that would be my point. Please be prepared to
Yep. Okay.
have something ready so we can add that at some dollar amount.
We could do that.
Member Dyson.
Yeah, thanks. I was listening very carefully. I think you inferred something I wanted to clarify. So the property tax will go out because of the bond reimbursement we didn't get. And then I thought you inferred that that would begin to be set a new tax cap limit.
So, just to be clear, the 41 million right now, unless the Assembly takes a different action, is not going to be included in the May when we set out the tax bills. It will not. It will include this. It will include school district bond debt, but it will not include the portion which the state is not including, not repaying the 41 million. If the Assembly elects to do that at in April, we would have time to adjust the tax cap for the mill rates that we send out in May. The path we are on is not to do that, but the Assembly may elect to do differently.
Yeah, so I remember memory of a couple meetings ago on this very subject that I understood that you, the administration, had the right to do that. Raises, yeah, okay. So if we did increase the tax contribution to backfill for the state reimbursement that didn't happen. And then the next year, the state did get back in the business of doing it. What we're taxing the property owners automatically go down?
So I'll let you answer that, but my understanding of it, and they can correct me, is, every time we pass a bond, it has with it, because it's a voter passed, it increases the cap.
Right.
And so the bonds that we passed increased by the entire amount of that bond. But then we were getting, so it's like the cap already increased with the bond's passage,
Yes.
and then we get whatever, half of that money, and so you don't have to tax up to that. And if they don't give us the money, it just sort of flows back to that prior authority. If you take 100 units that we did on the bond and we were getting 50 over and over, we were only taxing 50 because we were
Right.
getting the other. And if we stop getting the 50, it just rises back to the 100.
Right, that's what I understood.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And so, you're saying the administration is not going to raise the tax rates in order to backfill in this first go round?
For the 41 million, that's correct.
Yeah, and the other figure, there was another category of bonds.
If I remember in the school district's budget, they had other bond debt reimbursement, and I can't remember their calculation sheet right now.
So that
Beyond the 41 million. Beyond the 41
Yeah,
million.
so what, are we or are we not gonna raise the tax rate to cover that?
Mr. Dyson, let me look at the school district's budget and be clear on that, because I want to make sure that you get the right information, that the amount of debt that they are that we are asking the voters to reimburse, how much of that is separate from the 41 million.
Yeah,
I will do that.
And those two categories, so I understand it, one was the thing they've already done to us, right, which is we're not going to do bond debt reimbursement going forward. And then the second pile of money, the 41, is the new thing this year of, and we're not going to do any of the other stuff that we talked about. Okay, Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. I was dealing with something. I was distracted, so you might have said something like this at the beginning. I apologize if I'm asking you to repeat yourself. So, I get what you're doing. You're not going to put the $41 million right now, and hopefully we can set the mill rate. No, but what if the legislature drags on and doesn't get a budget set until June or July? How do we, like practically speaking, how do we do that? How do we set the mill rate without knowing whether we have to pay that or not?
We will set it based on the information that we have at that point. If the legislature makes a decision to not pay that debt, we would then just recover that debt when we set the mill rate next May. We only set the mill rate once a year. We don't. We don't do it again.
So it would be. Where would the funds come in the interim? Where would you get the $41 million so we don't default?
So we, I'll let Mr. Slifka jump in.
We normally do balance our cash flows, do a tax anticipation note, which you approved for this year of $90 million. We would probably, if that was the outcome, do an additional tax anticipation note with the understanding that we could tax to the cap and recover it in 2020.
I guess I don't quite understand that. So
We
you
sell
tax
short-term
anticipation,
notes
okay,
to
got it,
you,
got it.
and you give us the money, and we say we're going to give you the money back next year because we have the ability to tax and get that money.
We can
When you
make
say
it up.
You don't mean the taxpayer. You mean you as some
When
kind of
you, the
financial
investor,
institution.
want to
Yeah,
buy
okay.
these notes, you're buying them based on the understanding the municipality has the authority to tax to this level. We have the legal authority
Yeah.
to get that money.
Could, this might be a conversation, hopefully for later. Hopefully, this conversation we never have to have because hopefully the state will fulfill their obligation. But if they don't, I would like an insert included in the mailer explaining to everyone exactly why their property taxes jumped by $400 per $300,000 valuation. Say this is a result of the state government deciding not to do bond debt reimbursement. This is how much of your property tax bill has increased because of this.
Ms. Brown?
Through the chair to Mr. Dunbar, I will guarantee you that information will be included, and not only in their envelopes, but all over town.
Thank you. Mr. Weddle?
So, following Horace, the issue, the challenge here is, if we put it off, we don't have it in this year's mill rate. Then next year, it's a double. So it's not 450 per advertising, 900.
Yep.
So what I want to see is suck it up this year. We won't know when we do it. I just can't imagine that if you were a legislator, will we see a budget before we have to set the mill rate?
I'm not going to.
Yeah, but if we-
Ona predicted. I'm not going to predict on the
but,
legislature.
but I would not count on that. I would say we need to have it in there and just have it, and we will write checks back to you. We went through this 3 years ago. That's a hassle, but you know, what else do we do?
Back to Ms. Browse.
$1 million.
Through the chair to
Easy
Mr.
to
Weddleton, and if somebody else has more experience with this realm, they may be able to correct me, but the process of writing the check back to the property taxpayers costs so much money that the justification for making those payments back is not worth it. I think the administration would prefer to take the approach that we know this now, this is how we are going to deal with our budget with the information we have secured, and we will make adjustments in 2020 once we know how the 2019 legislature, whenever it ends, is finished.
But
Mr.
sounds
Dunn-
good until someone gets a 900. Someone with a house like mine, all of a sudden they have a 900 almost a would be a 20-some% increase in property tax, and they won't be able to pay it.
I do not disagree with
I
this.
can't, but many
Well-
can't. I know, but we have to be real.
Hold on.
And that's
Miss-
not people.
Mr. Dunbar.
So can I follow up on this? So I hear what John is saying, and I think there are two things to consider. One is if we do that, then that takes, to me, it takes pressure off of the folks in Juneau. They're like, oh, well, they're already collecting this tax, so screw them. They'll probably use a different word, but let the municipality handle it. On the other hand, and that's why I don't think we should do it, but could we collect the money, and then if they do pay their bond debt reimbursement, could instead of issuing a check, could we use it for next year's bond debt payment?
I don't know the mechanisms of how
There's
that
legal concerns here
return
too.
would- Right. I don't know.
There's a tax cap and everything else.
Yep, and I think that is an idea to explore. The other idea to explore is whether or not, when you issue the tax anticipation notes, you would be able to collect the deficit from 19 in 20 and 21 instead of pushing it all the way up into just 20. You would spread it across a couple of years to get that back. So instead of having a double hit in 20, you have a 1.5 hit in 20 and a 1.5 hit in 2021, and so on and so forth. So we can figure that out.
I'm kind of surprised that we have the power to kind of make up in the tax cap. I mean, sometimes the tax cap works in weird ways that are limiting the ratchet effect that we're familiar with in others, but we really can. There's a do-over or make-up provision to it?
Because of the bond approval, the voter bond approval authorizes that activity whenever it gets pushed into effect. So if the state isn't going to come in with their portion of the funds that they have traditionally been responsible for and pledged to pay, then the voters approved us to increase the tax cap the same way they approve us to increase the tax cap when they say, yes, fix these roads, yes, fix these
Right.
parks.
Ms. Slivka, do you want to add, or that was that answer? Mr. Weddle?
You know, just to address Forrest's point on, if we, assume we weren't going to get that 41 million in tax for it this year, I think the quickest way to get, 100,000 taxpayers to write letters to their legislators to say, we are going to tax you, it's going to increase your taxes X amount, and we'll refund it next year if the legislature does what they've been doing. So I think all of a sudden you have 100,000 new lobbyists. And we do what I think is responsible, is deal with it right now. I think it's real.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the shot back from legislators and the governor is, it was just a proposal, it hadn't happened yet, you're scaring 100,000 people for no good reason. It comes back to the question you asked, I think Mr. Dyson asked, how do we understand this governor's budget as a thought piece on things, or as a real document, as a real proposal? And I just don't know. It seems so extreme, it's hard to treat as a real proposal, but yet it was the thing he submitted to the legislature. It was a formal submission. One way is difficult to understand. The other's kind of condescending. You said it, but you didn't mean it, so I don't know how you get off that conundrum. Yeah.
I'd say also of the proposals, this one feels more real to me than some of the others. Getting rid of municipal assistance to me feels more likely than destroying the marine highway system. Getting rid of bond debt reimbursement to me feels more realistic than a 40% cut to the university. So I think I've been persuaded by Mr. Weddleton. I think we should tax for it and include. Maybe it's just because we just got reelected. We should tax for it and include an insert that says this is the Dunleavy 400. This is the Dunleavy tax increase.
Glad you guys agree. Neither one of you is the mayor, Mr. Peterson.
Well, we set the mill rate then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think if people are not aware that there could be significant cuts from the state that would have an effect on our property taxes here, they would probably have to have been on vacation in Antarctica for the last 3 months or 2 months or whatever. So, I know there might be a few people out there that pay property taxes that might not be aware, but I would say probably less than 10%.
Any comment, Ms. Browse, on that debate?
On whether or not people are clueless, I would agree with Mr. Weddleton because at the FCC meeting last night, some of the most engaged people in our community, a fair number of them were surprised when they got the ASD estimate and the total MOA estimate on the increase to property taxes. So my concern with doing a property tax increase in 2019 as opposed to 2020 is that there will be plenty of people in this city and state that then say that you are making this a problem because it has not been determined by the legislature yet, if that's the choice. So I think there's a fight on either side that is going to have to take place.
Is this our decision to make or yours and Mayor Berkowitz's decision?
All of the above.
We set the mill rate.
I know, I actually told them.
Okay. We've got other things on the agenda, but this is really important, of course. We shall take that under advisement. Maybe there's an amendment to the mill rate that comes from that. When do we vote on that?
You will set the mill rate on April 23rd. You approve the budget.
We'll consider. We've only gotten to A on our agenda. Anything further? B. Let's go courageously to
Mr.
B.
Chairman. So impacts on the earthquake for 18 and 19. Right now, as you remember, we set aside $30 million, about 19 for general government, 11 million for AWU and ML&P. On the general government side, we've spent about 14% of it, a little more than $3 million, and so the balance still remains. And then it's a similar amount in percentages for AWU and ML&P at this point right now. I think the thing that I want to bring up here is quickly is a follow-up to what Dr. Bishop and her team mentioned, and I think the Assembly mentioned it on Tuesday night, is, the administration's been having conversations with FEMA on not only the cost of actual reimbursement as it relates to earthquake insurance and then the amount of after your not deposit, but your your deductible. A $10 million policy would have at least a $500,000 deductible, and then it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to have. It's difficult to get. So we're weighing, if we have a $3 million bill for reimbursement, is it worth that when over the course of time? So measuring that is some of the things that we're taking light of. So free money from FEMA is certainly not free. And it may be, there's a lot of work being involved in that. So we're investigating that with due diligence, as is the district. So I just want to bring that to your attention.
Appreciate
That's
it.
all I have.
Questions, Mr. Weddleton?
So the 30 million, 11 million, are you revising this frequently? I just went through my neighborhood the other day. I was just out for a run. All of a sudden, there's a big pothole. There's a pipe that's like all at an angle.
Yeah,
How could they could have known that? It just happened.
Every Friday I get an update, and I expect the number to get bigger faster as spring break comes.
So is that based on what they know, or they kind of extrapolated?
They did a little of both. For general government, they have spent $2.5 million. They know that they're going to spend at least another $600,000. And as the snow melts, they're going to spend more, and they're going to expect more. I'm going to give information every week.
Thank
That's all I
you.
have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Wilbur, Mr. Slivka on the 2018 financial closing the books.
We've closed the books for the 12th month. We're in the 13th month. We are on track. The auditor is, I believe, on site working away. We are still working on a timeline to have everything done by May 15th and the CAFR delivered by July 1. The information that I think you guys are generally most interested in is the fund balance. We are hopeful to have that done by tomorrow evening. It may push into next week. And it's hard to say what is the guesstimate of what it could be. We'll just have to wait till we get that information, but everything else is on track.
Not even going to give us an order of magnitude look at that.
I know Lance has done some interesting work on the budget side, which would seem to be positive, but until, that doesn't necessarily always flow into those 5 major funds. So.
Mr. Weddle.
So just looking at these go through the end of September. This isn't your role, this is Lance's.
That's not mine. That's, I think, Desiree's.
That's for item.
Oh, okay. We don't know the end of the year.
We are still working through, it's a question about balancing the books and then doing all the work papers to reconcile everything that's encumbered, unencumbered, so that we get to the true fund balance aspect.
We don't know that through December 31 yet. And you will, is that when you say, when you know the fund balance, you mean that you'll
But this is the number that we set aside for our debt rating, 10% plus 2%, and it's that number we hope to have by early next week.
So, Desiree, these are not real numbers that are here. This is more for the formatting?
That's for formatting. The numbers are actually from SAP, but I picked 3Q of 2018 just because I figured.
The purpose of this is to have a discussion about how we want numbers presented to us, what we want to see. And so they are third quarter and they are SOP, and they should be used for how you want to look at things, not as numbers yet. We'll have a presentation on it. So the colored sheet is Desiree and Lance working with us to try and figure out a little bit more of a in-depth format that isn't the complete book, but isn't as minimal as we've been getting. Some more information. So we'll come to that. Mr. Wilbur on the 2019 budget.
All right. I think so 2019, and maybe I can talk a little bit more when we talk about the formats, but 2019, our departments, basically at 2019, as of the end of February, we were 16% through the budget through the year and about 13% spent. So the departments are doing very well. And when we get to H, I can actually walk you through where we are all the way through March with a little more detail to follow up.
Because this does represent 2019.
Yep, and I think I can.
Let's go ahead and do it. Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at, I made some copies of some.
Lance, I passed out Lance's version. It's got the from Lance Wilbur, OMB.
So you're looking at something that looks like this.
Yes.
Okay.
We weren't, but we are now.
Okay, so this is, as it relates to 2019, in an effort in working with Desiree to try to get a format. For some assembly members, this actually is probably going to look pretty familiar because we provided a report like this to you every quarter. We did not provide them every quarter in 18 because we didn't close any quarters in 18. But here's a report that illustrates how we're doing. The first page just is our numbers for descriptions. If you just go to the second page, the numbers, let me just point to them. On this report at the top, it tells you what percent through the year we are. We're at 16.2% through the year as of the end of February. But we pulled the information as of March 15th. Okay, so it's a point in time. You're following along. Look at number 2. That's our approved budget, which is $515 million. Number 3 is the supplementals. When you do a supplemental, you add to the approved budget, so you have a new budget, which is number 4. So the total budget is 521.
Supplemental means our first quarter budget.
No, and throughout the year, if you need money for elections or do anything that, if a service area wants to supply, wants to appropriate fund balance, all of those things, Girdwood, whatever it might be, they'll show up.
What is that big number for the
Is that Alex,
CFO?
Alex salary?
No.
That's the ML&P fees related transactions, the ML&P sales.
Oh, yeah, there are none.
That-
Right, and so every time that we do a supplemental, we tell you what assembly action you did and how we actually move forward on that. So, number 5 is the percent of the budget spent, including supplementals, 13%. Number 6 is departments will actually encumber money. What they do is they set aside money knowing that they're going to spend it in the future. They have set aside 6% of their approved budget for things they know they're going to spend in the future. If you look at what they've spent and what they've set aside under number 7 is 19%. Follow me? Making sense?
You did this through March 15th?
This is as of March 15th, and the reason it's important is because, and I'll get to it, because as of February 28th, well, we'll get to it because what we have available in non-labor is more current than labor. Labor is about 2 weeks behind.
Okay, just on the, so it's not really, I shouldn't be comparing it to 16, I should be comparing it to more like 20, given that these numbers.
No, you shouldn't. You should be comparing it to a point in time which is as of February.
Why am I comparing March 15th to February 28th?
So let's marry up. Let's carry on. So the next page is just taking your total expenses, dividing labor and non-labor. On the left side is we have, as of February 28th, only 15% of the labor had been posted. Okay. On this report, because we took it as a snapshot in time. That's where the percent of labor is spent is almost 16 at the bottom of 8. And then you can do the same thing for non-labor. The amount of non-labor spent is number 9, which is 9%. The amount they set aside but they haven't spent yet is 14. The amount they spent, the amount they set aside is 23%. Just their non-labor. Making sense? And then the next page is if you just looked at their labor and their non-labor.
Generally, labor tracks the percentages much closer because non-laborers can be big chunks of things moving around.
Could be in advance. If they encumber a lot of money, it will look very large.
Roger that.
Early in the year. The next page is the labor and non-labor. The line in the graph represents 15 or 16% of the year. You can see which departments are a little over and a little under in their labor at that point in time. The non-labor, you can see how much they have actually spent, which is the gray, and how much they've set aside or encumbered, which is the white. So you can see that the municipal attorney and purchasing they've set aside a lot of money they know they're going to spend, and they do that so that they don't spend it on other stuff.
Ms. Quinn-Davidson, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I appreciate this. I think it's helpful, but without knowing, maybe, okay, the muni attorney under 13, they're really high. Maybe they bought a Westlaw subscription for the year. That probably means nothing to most of you. And it's really expensive, but they won't pay for the rest of the year. But without knowing that, it's helpful to know they spent money, but we don't actually know if they're on track for the year. So is there any way through notes or another way to show big expenditure, not expected to have another one, on track generally?
So what we'll do is, if I can answer your question at the end,
Sure.
I will have, because there's more to add.
Okay, sorry.
The last page, and I will sum up. So the last page is a report that we will produce every quarter. We have to by code, and that is overtime by department. You get to see how they're running over. The other one that's required by code is travel by department. So when we produce this, the other thing that we will provide is we'll have a similar information for the utilities. It will be basically the same type of information utilities on a quarterly basis. And then when we give you it will come to you as an AIM, and it will address the questions that Assemblymember Quinn Davidson has, which is, we will tell you if they're running over plus or minus 5%, we'll highlight those. If they've encumbered a lot of money, we'll tell you why.
Okay.
We'll summarize all of that. So, but for your purposes and interested in the report, this is basically what we're looking at with the content, and you'll get tables like this for every quarter. Every monthly, I will tell you verbally.
I don't know if this is Austin again. I don't know if it's practical, but in a separate document, the AIM, then you start to compare them. I've sat on finance committees before where they just did little notes at the bottom that actually said, and I saw you did that on one of the documents. But is that possible, or is it too cumbersome to explain all of that just in that little spot?
Yeah, we'll try.
If it works.
Yep.
If it doesn't, it's okay. But
So, that's, and I think Desiree and I will work to get something a little bit more, something that she's put together and I have. But that's where we are in 2019. Departments are doing pretty good. And then I've sent, I think, Chair Croft, Desiree, and Barbara a suggestion about our work sessions for 2019. We currently have one scheduled for the 19th. I propose that the administration do theirs on April 12th. We're going to give you the budget on the 9th. You're going to introduce it on the 9th, maybe a work session on the 12th. We will do that the following Friday. If you guys have any amendments, you could take that time to do it, and then you're going to approve it on the 23rd, and we're going to set the mill rates by the 1st. So that's where we are on 2019.
And we might as well combine H as well. So Desiree and I have been working on, the goal is, I think, something that is somewhat more in depth than this, but not the budget, which is huge, and like getting a little bit deeper cut without burying us. And Desiree, Ms. Browse, sir.
I was going to say, to speak to Ms. Quinn Davidson's point, it might be helpful in the information that you're looking for as to not necessarily itemize. I mean, legal in particular, that information could be pertinent because they're encumbered so high. But it might be more useful if the directors, if they are over or under, say why that's not specifically about that, but because that's a standard item that they purchase every year. It's not abnormal. They know it's going to shake out. But instead, to draw your attention to, we're a little concerned about this because we're running hot here, and so we're going to keep an eye on it, and we'll update you on that, as opposed to the traditional purchases that are made every single year. And I don't know if you want both or.
no, I think actually what I'm asking for is the former, which is a description of why we should or shouldn't
be concerned or watch it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Dice.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, is it kind of inappropriate to ask any specific questions about categories of this stuff at this time?
No, you could do that, yeah, either about the numbers or about the categories.
Yeah, so, Lance, I really appreciate that. I'm looking at page, you got the number 14 at the top.
Yep.
And the second column, overtime budget.
Yep.
So when it shows the numbers in parents are the ones where they are underspent, or they're, what does the parents mean?
So what that means is their revised budget, so their overtime budget was originally 3.8. Their adjustment was a reduction of 1.5. We reduced police department's overtime by 1.5. So their total overtime budget is 2.2. It was an action we took to reduce their overtime budget.
Right.
Same thing
so
with
the
PME.
parents is in essence the savings or reduction down.
Correct.
All right. So a couple things that jump out here is an anomaly. What in the world happened that the Parks and Rec is 85,000?
Parks and Rec.
Ms. Browse has an answer.
Oh, so she does, Ms. Browse.
Through the chair to Mr. Dyson, the second column is the budget adjustments that were made. The fifth column is the over-under that they are currently spending at. So Parks and Rec, in their actual overtime spend, right now is at
30?
130, right? Is that the right line? I
Yeah.
think so.
Yep. Under budget.
Under budget. So I think what you're looking for is the parentheses of concern, if you will, in overtime spend, right?
Yeah, but why didn't you
On the
budget more
fifth
for that?
column,
In the fifth column, correct?
not in the second column.
Correct. So the points of concern are $2,000 in purchasing, $1,000 in the municipal manager's office, $700 in municipal attorney. So they're all pretty light
Yeah, all
in
right.
overruns percentage-wise right
Yeah, So go
now.
down and look at something here.
Well, before we move off that, what did we do that doubled their overtime budget? Is that from park cleanup, or at one point we said, no, not 70, let's do 150.
Yep.
And so that's not an operational, but do you,
In their overtime budget, they put additional resources into their overtime.
We would need to ask Director
Okay.
Rada.
Yeah, so my last question was some of this impacted by the earthquake? I assume we picked up quite a bit of overtime.
What this should reflect is any overtime in the earthquake in 19 should be not, this is just their approved operating budget. The account we set up for the
It's not
earthquake
actuals.
It should not be, this should not include the earthquake stuff.
Fred and I were wondering maybe almost can't.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
so Desiree, just briefly on what we're trying to do with this colored one.
So I put together the color supplement. It's just a really basic broad overview. Lance is giving you specifics on budget to actuals. Mine is a pool of the third quarter ending September 2018. I guess my question to the assembly is how much detail do you want? So I'm presenting something that's really basic and really broad overview, and if you flip on the other side, you have a little bit more of a drill down, but I didn't go into specifics of labor, non-labor, which is good information, and I really like Lance's reports. But it's more of a, what are you guys looking for? This is what I would suggest to start and work with Lance and kind of mesh the two together. If you want something higher, if you want more detail, but you don't want to go too detailed because then it becomes cumbersome.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of them. So Ms. Quinn Davidson.
You can go first, Fred. I think you were talking. No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, help me understand. This is my first time doing this. So, Lance, you normally do it this way. Desiree says we could do it this way. Are we being asked to choose one of the methods, or are we going to get both of these papers? And if so, isn't that kind of confusing?
No, we're hopefully just going to come down to one item
Okay.
to present to you guys. I just did this on my own, and then Lance put together his own, and this morning we were like, oh, hey, look what happened.
I guess my feedback would be I like the level of detail in Lance's. Yours is prettier and is organized in a way that's maybe with colors and different columns and kind of easier to read.
I totally
So
agree.
if you could maybe use both of your amazing skill sets to come up with something that captures both of them.
Lance's
And I like
format.
The graphs, Pete saying he likes the graph.
Graph is really good.
So I think visually like it. Just a small, short comment, which is kind of silly to bring up, but I'm not sure on page 2 where you say fire, fire, police, police, assembly, assembly, but maybe the title is on the
Right.
is the yellow one, but then the other one's a subcategory.
So-
If that's a sub, I don't think it should be far left. I just think it's confusing. So, but that's a very small statement.
That makes sense. You got that? Yeah, Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's helpful, and I like the way yours is organized. Responding to the issues that the chair brought up, the uncertainty of the funding sources. Somehow or the other, when we're looking at our anticipated revenue, some things are absolutely certain being done. And I'd like some way that the components of our income are
Yep.
set aside by color and something, and so that we know that one's liable to be a variable.
Through the chair, Mr. Dyson, the other report that you get that's not here is a revenue. This is just all spent. This is what we budgeted and what we spent. Dan Warren Treasury gives you a similar report, but it's just on the revenue side. I've been talking to them too, that instead of, you would get both reports either together or both reports at the same time. You'll see the money by color and then the spend by department.
Yeah, so, once again, channeling Eric's question. Got it. This, I mean, Eric and I and Pete sat in the legislature for years. Everybody's on bated breath, waiting for the revenue forecast, you know, which has never been accurate, but close, you know, within a margin of error, and so on. And here we said, as Chair has said eloquently or clearly, we don't know. Yeah, so it's just be helpful to us and you know, to be clear on that. I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, but thank you. And do that by spending categories. Yeah, I mean, just bond reimbursement's a huge one, but the state makes contributions, don't they, on PERS, TERS reimbursements, or a component?
Yes, and Treasury makes this look like child's work compared to the detail they put into their revenue projections. So we can blend their information in here by every single of the 140 something categories of revenue we get. We can blend that in, including whatever the state piece is as well.
Yeah, and Mr. Denbar is correct that some of these things will be easier for the state to do because there'll be less squawking from the gooses being plucked. And so on and so forth. And those are all pretty intangible.
Desiree, will you send the other members the things you sent me before, some formats from different places? I'm not sure we got. Yeah, and they didn't come through in this, but there's some different ways it can be presented. And you guys, it's not an open meeting violation. You guys can just communicate with her. I like this. I didn't like that. It'll give her some feedback as we assemble this. Mr. Weddleton.
One big, I certainly ditched the decimal points. Thousands. And so you have one, we have this first, but here's one that's just the quarter.
So I, on my sheets, have our current budget, our year-to-date spend, so that's January of 18 to end of September 18, and then third quarter actuals, which is, what is it, July, August, September.
Okay. I don't know if that adds much information to me. Sounds like just look at the first one.
They're all the same, it's just, here's your really simple version, here's your slightly more detailed, because like the assembly department is the clerk's department and the assembly and council and ombudsman. So if you wanted more of a breakout, that's what this is.
Well, I'm looking at this one here. And that says.
That's the expenditures. So the first sheet, I believe the first sheet was revenues and the second sheet
Oh, I'm
was
sorry.
expenditures.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I'm looking too.
Never mind.
Yeah. Ms. Quinn Davis.
Oh, maybe this is too early to say this, but I was just going to say thank you for bringing this to us early enough that we could look at it and think about how it's useful so that when we get to that time, particularly with the members, we understand what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one to have those discussions, and particularly Lance and Desiree working and your comments in as we head towards budget. So it'll be we'll get a lot of detail, but at some point getting this medium high level in a format that we like. So thank you both for doing that, and she'll send you some of those. We'll get comments back, and we'll hopefully do that. Sir, Mr. Clouder from the Budget Advisory Commission. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Nolan Clouder, Chair of the Budget Advisory Commission. So I'll be pretty brief because I know that we probably need to keep things moving along. But a couple of recent actions by the Budget Advisory Commission. We passed two resolutions. One was about the alcohol tax ballot initiative that's happening right now. We worded that as we were commending the Assembly for bringing it to the people and for passing that portion of it. And generally speaking, our group was very supportive of the tax, generally in favor of it. And I think on that resolution we had we were unanimous except for one no vote on it. One person had some concerns about whether whether taxes would really be directed towards the programs that they're supposed to be directed to, which, I mean, I believe that the way it's written, they have to be, but also whether or not, that the group that's paying the tax is really the one causing some of the public safety problems that are being addressed by it. So that was one voice on our commission. Otherwise, most folks.
It is, and they are, but yeah.
Right. So broadly supporting that.
Report back.
Yes. The other was the school district budget. We received a pretty detailed presentation by Andy Ratliff, and we had a special work session about it. So we had a detailed presentation, and we had a lot of discussion about it. A lot of the same conversations that you guys are having as a group about concerns about the state budget, school bond debt reimbursement is something that we talked about. Also, the general long-range picture of the base student allocation being dropped and how that also decreases the voluntary local contribution with regard to school budgets. And so a lot of us were pretty concerned with that, although, so we had a lot of conversation about the big picture state stuff, state budget issues. That didn't make it into the language of our resolution. We're kind of, moving forward as if, the budget is just going to, as if the government proposals aren't going to be part of the school district budget in the next year. And so we passed that resolution in support as well. Yes.
Mr. Weldon has a question.
Just offhand on the alcohol tax, I think your letter was to encourage us to put it on the ballot, which was like 2 months late. I mean, appreciate it, but it was like, I don't know if you could function more timely on that. But should that pass, then we say, what do we spend this money on? And it would be interesting to have you guys kind of look, and it's very loosely bracketed, but that's a big question, where we should spend it. Give some thought to that, and I want to hear from you before we vote.
Right, and through the chair, Mr. Wilson, we did actually plan to dive into the subject earlier than we did. We had a cancellation of that, just a scheduling issue with it, and we recognize that it was late. So we see that it's not ideal, but I appreciate that comment. Also about as to how the revenue could be directed, that is something that we would be interested in taking a look at. Right?
Member Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. I was just going to bring up that yesterday, I guess many of us, Forrest, Felix, a couple others maybe, were in a homelessness committee, and Nancy Burke and her team had brought forward a proposal of how they would spend the money if the alcohol tax were to pass. I think Forrest raised some questions about, this isn't necessarily how I would spend the money, and it's ultimately the Assembly's job. But I think that there are some ideas out there, and we'll see what happens in a couple weeks. But it would be nice for you to maybe talk with her too as you go through that process. And then I had sort of a process question. So I saw the BAC's both the resolutions when we reviewed our packet, and that was great to see you guys again. I'll say the thing I always say: you're super active now, and it's so awesome to see. But I didn't know if it was proper to. I mean, should we ever pull those from the consent agenda, but they're just reports, and talk about them and speak on, I don't know, these are for my colleagues, like, do we just kind of let that slide, or do we want to show that the public, or that the BAC has expertise and they're making recommendations to the Assembly? Because I think sometimes people might not otherwise see it.
Right. I don't know there's an answer for it. There's probably lots of answers. I appreciate you bringing it up. Any comments on that? We'll think about it. Ms. Browse, did you want?
I was going to clarify for Mr. Prada and Ms. Quinn Davidson that the spreadsheet that was presented in the homelessness committee meeting is the draft from the administration, and depending on the outcome of the April 2nd election, we will be road showing that list so that everybody gets to have their say. It'll start in the homelessness committee. We'll continue the conversation there so that the members can have that conversation with the public. We will also be having that conversation with the public. We plan to take it to the Budget Advisory Commission early enough so that when we are prepared for the budget presentations in October and November, that is part of the conversation. We have compiled the list from the last 3 years of what we have heard and seen needs the most attention. And we know that there are, missing pieces here and there, so it's not all-inclusive, but we fully intend to support that process.
Yeah, it's a no-win proposition, right? At the Sand Lake Community Council, they were really ragging me for not having a plan. And I'm like, well, we're going to do the process when we get there. And one guy in particular was, I'm not going to vote for it because you don't have a plan. So we do a plan, and Forrest rightly says, well, that might not be the plan. I think it's got to be just, here is a possible way we would spend this. So you know the kinds of things we're looking at. But it is going to be a determination that the next assembly makes. Mr. Weddleton.
Well, somebody needs to correct me if I'm wrong, because people ask me too, and I say, go look at Anchored Home, that's kind of our broad mission, and we'll fund what we can there. Is that out of line?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, that's not out of line. With the new list, I think it gives, as Mr. Croft was saying, there's a catch-22 there. There are some people who are going to say, well, I don't like any of this, so I'm not going to vote for it. And there are people who are going to say, I'm not going to vote for it until I see what you're going to spend it on. It needs to be, right at this point in time, it needs to be looked at as a document that the administration is putting forward the same way we put forward our budgets, with the intent that if we had the money, this is how we would spend it. Now, let's go into the public process and have the conversation. It is not limited. So Forrest wants to adjust it, or Felix wants to, whoever wants to adjust it through the standard assembly process with amendments and community conversation is absolutely what we expect to happen. But from our perspective, with the social service providers, public safety, and law enforcement, and the community members, and the information that we have gotten feedback on over the last 3 years, that is the list that we currently see. Are there missing pieces? We want people to come tell us.
Did that get, because I missed the meeting, so did that get?
Yeah, I'd like that circulated to everyone, because I owe that one guy in Sand Lake and some others the possible plan. Yeah. Ken, we're getting really short or even out of time, and our favorite thing, the SAP update, is still pending.
Do you want it, or do you?
Thank you, Mr. Cloud, for your service. Appreciate it. Yes, we do. Abbreviated, we apologize for that, Ms. Marshall, but tell us what we need to know.
All right.
SAP good.
SAP good. It's a quick one. Basically, the hiring update is that we've hired all the positions we plan to have hired. We just have 2 that'll all be starting a little later in the year. But everybody's secured and we're moving forward, so things are going great in that regard. Training update, meeting with each department. We're identifying training needs for that department, and the reason how best to provide it for each department. And I have the people mover up here because it's just a really good example of, as we dive into a department and see how we can help train them, we learn things like bus drivers are paid by the minute and they don't have any time during their paid time to do training. So do we do training? Do we not? That's the kind of stuff that we are uncovering and we're dealing with as we go. But that's just a flavor of the week, but we're going to get through it and we're going to get as many people trained as possible. Reports, as I said before, we had 4,000 standard reports that we discovered. We now have teams of subject matter experts and consultants that are reviewing those reports as they have time. So we do expect it'll take a couple months to complete, but when they find a report, a standard report, they're like, oh, this is great, let's share this with everybody. They're getting pushed out.
Have you told SAP you found 4,000 reports that they didn't know they had?
Yes. Well, they would say, oh, well, we knew they were there.
Yeah, so I'm still puzzled by that from your last.
I know, it's fascinating.
Why do you think? It's because they don't want people relying on them?
Well, it's like they say they're there, but they don't give you a list of them, and then they tell you how to activate them, but then they don't.
Mr. Chairman?
Train them.
Yeah.
Very poor customer service is the answer.
Thank you. I was being too detailed.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Yes.
What kind of reports are we talking about?
All over the board. So financial reports, HR reports,
So this isn't
procurement.
reports of bad paycheck information?
So by reports, you mean formats, kind of a format for presenting the data?
A report that goes out and grabs data from the system and provides the data layout. So
if the data lives in the system and you're looking for a profit and loss report, it's that kind of a report.
Yeah.
You're
So
looking
it's
for how many employees you have over the, whatever the informational reports that you need to get the data out of the machine. Those are the reports that they're talking about.
Kind of what we were talking about was what do we want our report to look like,
Yes,
right? What do we
exactly.
want
Yeah.
the Assembly's report to look like? And there's a whole bunch for every other operational thing.
So what happened was is we had these reports, we activated them, but we never gave anyone access to them. And then we have spent this time what I've learned is that we spent a lot of time creating custom reports because these other reports, everyone's like, where's the reports? Oh, let's develop a custom report. It's like, no. So that's where we're going. And I think we're going to uncover a lot of ways for people to get more data out of the system because we're putting a lot of data in the system. So let's get it out and use it.
Lots of stuff, Mr. Dunbar and then Mr. Webb.
When you say we were creating custom reports, was our in-house staff doing that, or were we like tasking either SAP or some other contractor to build us this?
We were tasking.
Can we go back and say, you should have told us this other, you built us a custom report, knowing this other custom report existed, we demand that you pay us that money back? And this is our team of attorneys that
I was like,
also politely request that money back.
I think we have pushed back a lot, but I don't know if there's a recourse. Is that what you're asking? Like, is there a way to get
Through
our
the chair to
money back?
Mr. Dunbar, we have spent a fair amount of time. I think the further we get away from implementation, the looser I may become with my opinions on this. But the way that it was implemented and the billing process with SAP has created a lot of back and forth between the IT department, purchasing department, legal department, and the mayor's office, saying, this bill is not accurate, you need to go back and take this out, you need to take this out, you need to take this out, you need to take this out. We have accomplished millions of dollars of decreases through that process because some of their information is indefensible and or they don't want to go through the fight with us on something like that. Whether or not that process is being applied to each of the specific reports, we would have to go back and talk to Philippe and all the other people who have worked specifically on it. But some of that has been done, and all of that information is being cataloged.
Yes, and the custom reports are good reports. It's not that that's a bad thing.
So yeah, they've done some of that. I guess we have.
Mr. Webb, since there are 4,000 reports, you might get with Lance and Desiree. But
Yes.
Maybe one of those already worked. Save us a lot of time.
There you go.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Can I?
No, we want a custom one.
I just want to just do a quick, because we now have our team, with more people in it, and we have more experts on our team. We are now, what we're trying to do is get our arms really around this break, fix, and stabilization priority and how we get through this and how we're doing this. And now we have just created this collection of data and how we're presenting this information, which
What's
is
Philo?
Philo is all of the accounting section.
Financial.
Thank you.
HCM is ER stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Philo would be financial and logistics. It's probably a good way to look at that. But what it is now we are getting to the point where we could say, well, what's our backlog of all of our change requests? Now we're going to be able to just dive right into that. So we are now starting to have real visuals on how much, what's going on, when it's going on, and with that,
That's reassuring and disturbing. We're just now getting that?
well,
Through the chair to
that
Mr. Croft.
visibility.
The visibility is there.
The visibility.
As we said at the very beginning when we came to Budget and Finance Committee to talk about payroll corrections, initial was fix the machine, then was fix the problems, and now it's figure out better ways to fix the problems. Next it will be, let's talk about how we fix the problems and how the process is getting better, and soon much more people will be able to exhale and trust in the work that has been done so far. So yes, it's been a very long process.
Yes. So.
Kind of felt that
If
way.
Mr. Trainee were here, he would probably tell us.
No, we saved at least 10 minutes by.
Give us a history lesson.
But that's all I have.
Excellent.
Just kind
And
of-
we're running out of time. Desiree, for the foreseeable future, let's do these as an hour and a half, even though I'm on my way out. Any questions of Ms. Marshall? Mr. Falsey is in Juneau with the mayor, and we covered H. So I think we're to audience participation. Is there any member of the public who wants to testify? Mr. Haberman.
I'll be very brief. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I live in the Master Valley. Follow the public process. The public process done appropriate. Decision made by the governing bodies, more like the tax collectors. The previous meeting, just before this meeting, I made a concern, and I hope the assembly members hear this, and particularly the administration is present. You had a very lengthy meeting Tuesday night. difficult for myself entirely. But the fact is, the critical record on the Unity website, that very meeting, document, the agenda, the videos, and it's Thursday. It's still not there. Still not showing. And I made mention concern at the 11 o'clock meeting. I remember they sent me a present, no response, and the meeting, but this is not the way to go. And that's why I'm bringing your attention to this scenario. And how I came across that was simply this. The documents at the previous meeting, and I wanted to check when it was on the agenda. And I saw, I'm not on the new website. So we need to get at it very fast. Correct that. Thank you very much. That ends my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anyone else?
1 minute, 49 seconds to spare.
That's right. Seeing nobody, we're adjourned.